Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our next live stream. I'll be your producer for this session. Before we start, I do have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional, and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenters to answer live. Our session is being recorded. It will be available to view on demand right here on the Reactor channel. With that, I'd love to turn it over to our speakers for today. Thank you for joining.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me. So my name is Daniel Fang. I'm from Microsoft. My role is solution engineer. So today I'm going to spend the next hour with you together to talk about how we are able to use GitHub Copilot to do Agentic DevOps with Spec Kit. And we will try to do some live demo, see how we are able to turn some specs into CI/CD pipelines using GitHub Actions. So we try to keep everything interactive. If you have any questions, so feel free to leave a message in the chat. We have some dedicated time in the end to answer your questions too. All right. So if you like AI, you like robotics, you have some developing experience you want to share with me, welcome to connect me on LinkedIn. That's my QR code. So today's session, we're going to do a few things together. All right. Let's move on to the next slide. So what we will talk about is how we are able to do spec-driven development using GitHub Copilot. I will run through a number of labs with you together to show you we can use the Visual Studio Code with GitHub Copilot. We are able to start some conversation with the Copilot, then in the end, step by step, trying to control our workflow. Then in the end, hopefully we have some GitHub Actions, YAML files ready to go, and we will try to deploy our app into Azure. And if we look at it more, that's roughly today's agenda. I will share a repo link that contains all the lab info I have done today. And then we will do about 5 different labs. The first one is I will show you one lab about how we are able to deploy infrastructure of code using a GitHub action. Then we will do a step-by-step walkthrough, try to deploy a front-end app. And we are going to use Spec Kit as the main drive to carry out all the development. Then we will also run 2 different sessions in the background. One thing is we will use a cloud coding agent on the cloud, github.com, try to run a backend step API deployment. We will pretty much just run that in the background, and we check the result in about 20 minutes. Then we also will run another session, try to add some pipeline to deploy the app into different environments. So earlier it is only deployed to dev. Now we want to carry on deployment into each of the development environments like prod, QA, and production. Then finally, we will look at a few interesting links you can do further study, or you want to connect me, and we have some information and QA in the end. All right, so what are we going to learn together today? First thing is, how are we able to control the Copilot behaviors? If you have particular patterns you want to Copilot to follow, you have particular ways you prefer the Copilot should always do in that way. So we are able to add customized instructions. We can use the Spec Kit, basically help you to position your Copilot to work the way you like. And today's demo is more focused on CI/CD. We are able to not only using Copilot to write the code, but also using Copilot to do the integration for the deployment pipelines using GitHub Actions. And the right-hand side is what we are talking about, the Spec Kit. Spec Kit is a framework or pattern from GitHub. It's an open source library. You are able to look at their repo. There's a good example there if later on you want to learn more about it. Okay, so before I jump into the demo, there's a few commands. I want to have them in your mind, and we will show you how each of these commands work. The first one, very important, is called SpecKit.constitution. So we can engage that command using the / command inside the Copilot. As the name indicates, that is all the rules you want the Copilot to follow. For example, the patterns, no API keys in the code, etc. Once you have the constitution set, you can start to develop your features. So it can be one particular feature you want to do, maybe deploy front end, deploy the backend. Basically, it's a feature set you want to implement. After that, you can clarify, have a conversation with the Copilot to find out the best approach to do it. What are the tasks it can break down? What are the steps you need to do some research on? The Copilot is able to work with you in your conversation styles and give you some tips so that you understand and able to carry on development. Before we write the code, we have two more steps, which is a plan step. It is try to give you a plan saying these are the steps I will follow. When I say I mean the Copilot will follow, and also can divide a big task into smaller parts so the Copilot can carry on with each of them. Finally, the implement step is the most important one. That is where the agent, the Copilot, try to really do the coding work, set up the pipeline. And because we are going through the whole phase of design and then research, we are not doing web coding anymore. We actually try to have all the Copilot implementation under control, follow the pattern you would like to do. Okay, so I will put my repo into the chat. You are welcome to have a look, maybe focus, and there are also kind of details of the steps you can follow to learn. So I put the link into the chat now. Welcome to take a look. And while you're doing that, let's do a few things together. The very first thing I want to do is I will do a step-by-step walkthrough. However, before I do that, I want to kickstart two sessions. So if you have been using github.com, now for the repo, we have a tab called Agent tab. From the Agent tab, you actually is able to ask the agent to follow instructions and working on something in the background on the cloud. You can still turn off your computer. It will still running on the cloud. And let's try. So basically in here, I will leave it running. The purpose of this session is try to deploy the API app, which is a .NET. I will just start the session and leave that running over there. We come back towards the end of the session, see if the agent is able to implement everything. Okay, so that is the first background task. The agent on the cloud is trying to set up CI/CD for the API application deployment. Okay, so while that one is going, I will also have my second session running in the background again. So this session is if we have used the GitHub Copilot CI, that is how the CI looks like. So you can go into your local repo, then run a command like Copilot. It will open up a very cute icon over there. That is the CI interface. What I will do here is, in the background again, I will set up the autopilot. Okay, let the autopilot trying to implement another pipeline for different stage of like a dev, QA, production environment. That's the second thing I wanted to run in the background. So for that, I have enabled the session and I will paste my detail into the chat. So that's just some instruction. And then I will kickstart the session. Okay, so it's just some instruction saying I want to now deploy multiple environments. That's some instructions and you follow all the Spec Kit step. And if you don't know any of the steps, that's okay, because we're gonna run through them one by one while the two sessions in the background are working. So there are two sessions. One session is this one, that is using GitHub CLI. The other session is here, which is on the cloud, github.com. It's a cloud coding agent. Okay, we'll leave them. We'll come back to that in about 20, 30 minutes. So good. Now let's go back to the repo. So the repo I put in the chat basically point to here, and I have checked out the code locally. There are two applications here. One is the web, so that's the front end. The other is the back end, which is the API. Fairly straightforward. So if I try to run it, it runs perfectly in your local. We can .NET run. That will start a backend. Front end is a React application. I will run that, and then it will start the front end. So if I open that, and you'll notice now we have a built-in browser inside the Visual Studio Code now. It opens like that. It looks like this. It calls the API to fetch all the episode details. That's why these fields are displayed. It's fairly simple to run. So the purpose of today's session is I want to deploy everything currently runs locally into Azure. We want to create the CI/CD pipeline, and then it can deploy the infrastructure, but also deploy the front end and the back end. Okay, hope that makes sense. All right. So I will shut down those two applications. And then let's now look at the Spec Kit. I will take you through them one by one. Okay. To enable Spec Kit, the first thing we want to do is we want to install the Spec Kit. So to install them, it's fairly straightforward. What we can do is let's go to the terminal window, maximize it. The first command you want to do is the to install and the CLI spec file CLI, and that is the version of it. Once you run it, it pretty much installs some package to your local. It's like an extension. So once this is installed, we can do a quick check. We need to initialize the repo locally. Okay, we do that. Specify space init local. You have a few options the spec kit support. The first thing, because I already have a repo there, I will say yes, just use that. You can use different coding agents available. So all the well-known, the big ones are here. But for today, let's stick with the GitHub Copilot. I pick that. And you can also pick which shell you want to use. I will stick with PowerShell. So once you do that, pretty much it has set up your local environment to use SpecKit. And if you look at left-hand side, a few files has been added. What the SpecKit does is it will add all the extensions. That whole folder called the .specify is all the files from the SpecKit framework. It will help you to do the design brainstorming. And now it's also added a number of agents. All these agents are the commands we will go through slowly one by one to show you how we are able to have a defined process for the agent to develop the code. It's not web code. It is all controlled and it can follow the pattern you prefer to do. All right. So that's good. So now what we have done is we have everything ready to go locally. I will now turn on our GitHub Copilot. So I have the Copilot session window on the right-hand side. All right. Let's start to take a look how we are able to use these tools. For example, you can do a slash and start with spec. Once you do that, it's called slash commands. The Copilot already picked up there are a number of agents, a number of shortcuts you are able to use. For example, you can start with the specify. That's the first command to design a feature you want to implement. Then the spec kit can work with you together to go through them gradually. Okay, but before going into detail, I'm gonna show you the first action already done before the session. Just give you some idea how it should look like. The workflow GitHub action I have done here is the first one, deploy the bicep into Azure. All the Azure resource will be kind of automated via this action. It will deploy the resource group and all the resource under it. So that is the outcome I want the pipeline to set up. But how I did it is the spec kit will create all the specification inside a folder called the specs. And inside there, you can see I have defined a feature. It's very similar to do your sprint planning. You want to see that's a feature I want to implement. That feature is about bicep development, deployment, and then with help of the spec kit, you will start with defining the spec. I will zoom out a little bit. So it's, actually, let me go to the preview. So that's easier to read. What the spec kit does is it does not jump directly into write the code. It wants to have a conversation with you, try to understand what's your view of how to implement the feature. In this case, I have a few chats with the agent back in March, and the agent can split the whole story, a CI/CD pipeline for bicep into a story to do the deployment. Then it will also capture the other story about tagging it, which is correct. You should always do that. Then it even give you some idea how to handle the edge case. Most important part of the spec is define all the requirements. Basically, it will capture what the Copilot need to implement as all these requirements line by line. And then later on, when the agent done the coding, the way to validate against each of these criteria, making sure all the new code it has implemented does not forget anything. It's a very good way for you to cross-check, because sometimes people always think is the agent forgot about further past conversation, it missed out the requirement. And also no one is able to kind of check what need to be done. It just feels like an agent gave you a bunch of code. And that's exactly the problem the spec kit trying to solve. Okay, so let's say no more. So that is the example I have, but let's do it together. See how we are able to run everything from end to end. Let's deploy the front-end app. Okay, so I will close this window. I will go to my chat window. The very first step to use SpecKit is we probably want to create a feature bench. So if we look at the right-hand side, And let me zoom in a little bit, zoom out a little bit. So first question I ask is, let's create a branch. And that is a git command you can engage from the spec kit. Create a feature branch called the web deploy. And then it will be able to use the git command. You can see my local branch has now switched to the new branch called the web deploy, right? So that's good. Then we will start to push that over. Great. So that is just set up the environment. Good. We have a branch we can working on. All right. So the first task I want the spec kit to do is basically I want to create a new feature. That's the pump. I will use the specify command. It should be able to help me deploy the front-end app, which sits in here. I showed you earlier. And these are the details I know I want the spec kit to follow. So the idea of this is it is just first start step. If I run this, the spec kit, if you look at the left-hand side, it will start to create our 002 folder, which is our second feature. And then it will start to create the markdown one by one. And each time it creates a markdown, basically you are doing the syncing process with the Copilot, try to making sure all the requirements, all the details are being captured. So now I have run the very first command. As you can see, SpecKit has switch to a customized agent from the spec kit, which is specified. But if you wonder what actually is inside there, you can go to the agent, go to the speckit.specify markdown file. If we open that in the preview, easier to read, it is just some instruction from the framework. It can help you to kind of look at what are the setup is required, what are the steps, what are the kind of individual thinking process you need to go through with the Copilot, and then it will give you some initial documentation to start with. As you can see so far, the spec kit has made some edits already. If we go down to the folder, like I told you earlier, now we have our second feature called 02 Web Deploy, and it has created a spec.markdown file. So if we look at that in detail, what that does is just to capture what I have asked the spec kit to do. Okay, so that's the initial detail. We'll go through that in detail a little bit, but before that, I will kick off the second command. So the second command I want to, and let me keep all the changes so we know what has been edited. The second command I want to go is, you read through the initial kind of plan, right? There are some detail you found out, it's not quite there. It's not as specific to my scenario, how I want to do it. What you can do now is you can have a follow-up question called clarify. When you send the clarify command, you basically provide more details. You tell the spec kit where the app is, what the type of the app it is. In this case, I should be using the static web. And how you want to handle all the variables, where are the secrets already set up. And you also you can ask me a few follow-up questions. If you found out there's some gap in the requirement, I haven't provided detail, you ask me, then I can choose from the option, then we can move on to the design. So far we are doing is, we're just trying to go through the design phase with the spec kit. Okay, so while the Copilot is thinking on the right-hand side, let's take a look at what actually in the spec.markdown. In this file, again, it tries to break down the implementation into small pieces. And for each of the piece, it will give you some idea. If we are familiar with all the Spring process, you know, all the acceptance criteria, right? And all the details about test and why it is a priority, blah, blah, blah. And while we are waiting, on the right-hand side, SpecKit has improved the spec.md a little bit because I added some more information. It has added a session saying, okay, at that time, SpecKit had a conversation with Daniel, and that is the outcome. There's a few things, additional detail has been provided, which is pretty good. You can carry on with that clarify session a few more times. But for now, what I want the agent to do is, all right, enough discussion. I'm happy with whatever you have. Let's get it, start to look at how we can build it. And I can now use the speckit.plan. What that plan does is, if we look at left-hand side, it will start to work out a plan file now. And in the plan file, if you open it up, it will have all the details about how the plan should look like, what are the details in the plan, and what are the steps, what are the programming language. Let me open that in the preview page. it will be able to provide more details. And it's also trying to look at the repo structure, try to look at what the source code actually sitting. Then it will try to look at as additional complex question you may want to answer, and that's it plan out. So the idea of that plan is it will create the plan file, and you can see here it also start to create a checklist for the self, because as the agent goes through more, it need to have a list for it to cross-check. If you look at the requirements file generated by SpecKit, it try to making sure all the principles you have set in the constitution has been reflected here. And each of these books basically is the Copilot trying to tick it, making sure nothing is missed. And if later on, at a later stage, it found out, all right, I missed one step. So it will even go back to here to untick it. So it knows if new feature need to be reviewed and built, some of the gap exists in the code. Okay, so it is still thinking. Now it has done the plan. It is now trying to create the research. Research is a very good step because you may not really know everything how you want to technically do it. Sometimes ask a Copilot to give you some suggestions, looking at the best practice, look at a few things you have connected with a Copilot, like Microsoft Learn, like Azure. It will really help you to have finalized your solution so that when you do the implementation, you have everything covered. You don't need to do that again. So good. Now it has progressed. It's now more on the data model. Data model probably is more relevant to the like API deployment or database deployment, and also the workflow interface. So as we speak, it has created more files now inside of the data model. It is just about how the data passing to different steps would look like. In our case, it will be each of the GitHub action. How do you pass on the detail? How do you pass on the variable, secret, etc.? It's try to define them. And that thing can go into your documentation straight away because you have everything clear defined. You have all your naming convention followed. If you don't like some of the variable, you can modify now. Because the idea of these files is it's something for you to modify if you are not happy about it. You can have full confidence or full overview of all these implementation details before you pass on to the Copilot, which is very different if you just ask Copilot to start working straight away. It's more for a kind of a more controlled way. Okay. All right, so that step has finished. So what do we get now is you can see under the 002 folder, we have a few things already. We have got our spec, we have got a plan, we have got the research and data model, and also we have a checklist. Okay, so all these are feeding back into the spec kit for the later step because we're gonna do the next step as let's start creating the tasks. So what that task does is so far, we have done a pretty good job about designing the feature, put all the pattern in, but it has not really be able to like action list. It comes to really go through all the details to implement it. So with the SpecKit task, it is just trying to break down feature development into actionable small steps. And then when the coding agents do the implementation later on, it is able to do small parts, then it can keep on tracking and building out. And also all this progress is captured inside of these markdown files. So if you did not finish your session today and want to continue tomorrow, the Copilot can easily pick up the progress from this file and continue with it. Basically, you don't need to start over. And if a different teammate trying to use the same repo, all the concepts are there. The other session will be able to pick up all details and then progress. And that is very important because we can have multiple people working on the same repo and then they all have their details, the requirement conversation captured here. All right, so that task is gonna run a little bit, but while that task is running, I will show you a few more things. So if we look at the agents, you can see we have different flavor here. But if you ever wonder, when I do the task, what exactly in this markdown file? Let's have a close look. So it's no magic, it's all pump. In this case, let me open in the preview. So it basically defines a few things that Copilot can utilize. For example, it has some details about the spec extension. It has some outline saying you need to look at all these files, generate them by these steps. If you remember these steps, that's exactly where this file name coming from because it's all a part of the framework. Then now we are doing the task. It will say, all right, you need to follow that task template. So if we go to that folder, That's a part of the installation from the Spec Kit is to supply all these best practice patterns. For example, the task markdown file is basically following this pattern. And if you take a look, a lot of the fields are basically placeholders, right? And then a lot of checkbox list file is not ticked. And when to run the task, it basically copy from the template and try to fill in all the gaps. And that is how the best practice pattern is being replicated going through your development lifecycle. So that's good. Now we have our /task done. So let's take a look at what we have now. We have the task.markdown file as we expected. So if we go to the preview, again, a lot of prompts, some instructions. The key thing is you can see these ones are not ticked this time because the purpose of this tick box is to making sure when the implementation starts, the agent is able to tick them as it goes. Then you can have clear visibility of which things are done and which things are missed out. But for now, I will keep all the changes. Let's click start the next step. So we are not doing implementation yet. I want to do one more thing. The thing is, in reality, you have so many markdown files. Each of them looks good. But how do you know when they combined, they actually complement each other rather than they have different opinion in different files? And that is when we need to use the /analyze. The idea of this command is it will look at every single markdown inside your feature folder, making sure they are all aligned. It's not like everyone have a different view. They are all consistent. If they found out, okay, this file says that, but the other file says that, it will even ask you a question inside the Copilot chat saying, all right, this one I think has an issue. You need to give me some feedback. Should I follow this way or follow the other way? Or you want me to just automatically suggest the option for you? And that is how we are able to work with the Copilot. And then it gives you suggestions. You are guided by the process defined by SpecKit. Okay, so that analyze might run a little bit. What I will also do is there's one more command. If you remember, we have a checklist file here. Oh, okay, I think it's already getting some results back. So let's take a look. So the analyze is good. Like I said, it starts to compare different files, try to highlight all the inconsistency. And by the way, it highlights quite a number of inconsistencies. So if you have time, I suggest you really go through each of them to see, all right, does that make sense? Because if that makes sense, that's something you really want to go back and fix them up before you move on. And the best part is it even can cross-check. That's the task. That's the requirement. These two tasks is trying to achieve that requirement. And what is the issue? Blah, blah, blah. So it gives you a very detailed report, right? And if you look at summary, it also say which one are high. Looks like we have one critical, one high. So that probably will be my focus. A few other ones, it can be for some details you don't really need to worry about. But let's say that's good. Before I move on, I also want to do the update the checklist again. So what I will do is I will run the checklist command. If you still remember what's inside the checklist file, they have a few checklists from the earlier documentation, earlier process. If you run that checklist again, basically it's try to update here. See in the later step of design, is there anything changed? Are we having more items I need to track? Okay, but in the end, it is just a way for the agent or Copilot to remember these things I need to do. Oh, good. Actually, it gives me a good example here. As I told you, when it found out anything is not consistent, it will ask you questions and it give you options. For in here, it has 3 questions. You can decide which one you want to do. And you can also skip it. And it also have different options you can pick from, right? So that is what you can pick. And in this case, I will just don't worry about them for now, but you can just tick one and then it will reply to the agent. You can then progress to next step. So that's good. I will stop this. Now I think we're pretty good. We have everything well captured. You have all the details in here. What we want to do is finally waiting for a long time. I'm gonna ask the agent to do the work now, which is we engage the .implement. And that command will take, you pretty much will say what's the feature name you want the agent to do. In our case, you see we have 2 folders. That folder I pass in basically is our new feature, which is the web deployment. The agent now going through, look at all the details, but most importantly, to follow the task.markdown. As it goes through, you will be able to see some of these tick boxes are being ticked. It means the agent has done that requirement. It has finished that task. And on the right hand side, if you take a look, when the GitHub Copilot trying to work, it's quite good. It's very organized. It breaks down the whole big job into smaller phases or steps. First one, it says I need to understand requirements. Then it says I need to create a workflow. Then I need to add a workflow dispatch so you can run that anytime, trigger it anytime you like. And then it will then finalize to some validation. Good thing, after a while, half an hour, now we have our YAML file coming up. That's our 002 file. If I go back to the folder, open up the workflow, we have the YAML file here now. And if we take a quick look, so it's still working on it, but you can see it start to putting things together. You have the workflow dispatch, which asks for, it will define an environment name, can be dev, QA, prod. It will have some concurrency control. For example, you have multiple PR commits, it will only run one at a time. And I think it's all done, the to-do list, right? And if we look at the task doc markdown, it has also been modified. If we are wondering what has the agent changed over there, so let's take a look. You can see it has put X against each of these task items, and it is all over the page. It's basically ticked every single box. And it will only do that as it starts to build out a script. In our case, it's simple. It's just a one YAML pipeline. But imagine you have a bigger development task. It's across multiple pages, across multiple steps. This tagging is so helpful because you know where it is at. And interesting, it has a few things not done. That's a perfect example. It haven't done this, which is a bit interesting because the .NET app, I don't know why there's some other programming language over there, but that's okay. That means we have a gap. That's something we need to iterate again, ask the Copilot to see why there's some gap over there. Okay, but so far it's good. Let's look at our pipeline. So now if I go back to the pipeline, so what it has done is it set up everything. The action it will follow is check out the repo, set up a node. Thank you. That's a React application. Yes, get a package. So that's a very good thing. It even remember to add in a variable. That is the API for the front end to call the backend API. It has set up a variable. It handles all my secrets. Basically, that's how we call into Azure for the app deployment. Then also have some package to deploy Azure static web page. So it looks all right. Then finally, it will write a deployment summary of, oh, everything is done, right? So I think we can commit it and see. But just in case there's some error, what I will do is I have my plan B here. Let's compare if there are actually any difference. Because people always say the Copilot is undeterministic. So every single time it may give you some different flavor. Okay, so let's open them up. Let's see. So compare the left one is the version I had before it's working. You can see it has different flavor, right? The first time it ran, it give additional text. And that looking good. And then also give a different name for the jobs, which is okay. It's just a label. It does pick up a difference here. So previously, I'm trying to really using a bash script to change the environment variable. But in this case, it just set up passing directly, which is okay because that's defined inside my repo. Still have the Azure login. But in this case, interesting, where the left-hand side one, oh, that's good. And then it will give ID of the step. Okay, there's a little bit extra flavor, but I don't think any of this matters. It should still work. Okay, so what I will do is I will go back to my commit button. And if you haven't used, the Copilot now have a button called the generate commit message. So rather than I need to do it myself, the Copilot will summarize all the changes and prepare the commit message for me. And if you take a quick look, what things have been changed, most of the changes are under the feature folder, 002 web deploy. That's all the markdown we have worked through with the Spec Kit Copilot together. It also captured the feature inside the JSON file. Basically, it's a part of Spec Kit. It will remember, okay, that folder is something I created earlier. It's about one feature. Then it also have a few updates in the Copilot instruction file. Basically, highlight the Copilot need to be aware there's some information inside there. Finally, that's our pipeline file. That's looking good. Let's commit and push. So it's a local branch, and I will push that to remote. Then let's create a PR. I want to merge that to the main branch. And again, you can see a great button here to summarize the PR changes, save a lot of time. If you're really into it, you can also use the Copilot review. Basically, it will look at all the change file locally to see if there are any security things you need to fix up. I will continue with create, and the PR on the github.com should be there. So if I go to github.com, oh, good news. Our first background session has finished. That is using coding agent. It took 21 minutes. We'll look at that in a ticket. But if I go to pull request number 26, the new one I just created, if I go in there, exactly all the same thing we saw earlier. So I have a confidence it should work. So let's click merge. And let's see if in the end, the action is able to deploy the front end into remote. So if I now go into the action tab, previously we have got the deploy info. It's already there. And just now we created the 002 deploy web. If I go into that tab, because we have completed a pull request into main, the action has automatically been triggered. And if we go into the action, hopefully it's all working, but we will find out. So good thing, the action is progressing. It has a number of action steps it's trying to follow. So right now it's doing the build. Build means it's packaging up all the React app, zip it, and then it can deploy to Azure. Then it will progress with login, set up nodes, the build, etc. So I think it will take a little bit of time. So let's run. Okay, let's see. So now it's setting up that. So that is basically the demo. I want to show you step by step how we are able to use GitHub Action, and the action is able to compile and build. That's the most important step, is pushing the package into Azure now. Okay. Then in the next two lab, what I will show you is we will look at the Copilot session on the cloud agent. It has deployed, in this case, is the API. Finally, we will look at multiple environment deployment, which is in my local, the GitHub CLI using autopilot. Okay. Okay, that's good. No error message. Good, it worked. We have now got a green tick inside our action. And good. So let me find what's the front end URL, and let's see if it actually works. So I'll open new tab, checking the URL. Sorry, that's not the URL, that's my repo. So let me get the right one, which is here. Hopefully it should show up the purple screen, just like what I showed you earlier. Here we go. That's good. So we have our front end up and running on Azure. Awesome. And you're ever wondering why this thing is not loading, because we haven't deployed the API yet, which is our next task. Okay. So I close that. That's an earlier window I open. Okay, that's good. All right, we're progressing well. So far, everything worked. So next part I want to show you is, let's look at our aging session. So while we have been talking for the last 37 minutes, the cloud agent in the github.com has also been working very hard. It has followed my instruction, saying I want to follow the exact step I have walked through with you step by step. But in this case, I just pass on all the steps into the cloud agent. The cloud coding agent will be able to follow it. I say step 1, you need to do specify. Number 2, you need to do the clarify, and then you follow the plan, task, analyze, checklist, implement. Very much the same step, what we have done. And if you look at what the session looks like, so the Copilot set up the environment, get my repo, set up a few MCPs. Then the Copilot start to look at my existing action like I did earlier. If you remember, that's the best one. It understand I'm trying to do a Spec Kit. Then it try to look at all the existing files so it can understand patterns. After that, it will follow each of the steps. For example, step 1, the spec.markdown. Then it follows step 2, which is the plan. Step 3, it is the, I think up there, so analyze checklist, 5, 6. Finally, it implement. So the outcome of that is, after 20 some minutes, it output as a YAML file, which is our API deployment. And then in the end, it summarizes all the details, and it will give you a PR to review. So if I follow that PR, one thing, the coding agent itself are not allowed to approve its own PR. So it will wait for you to review everything before you give a tick to the PR, then it will emerge. If now you look at the draft PR created by the agent session, go to the file changed. Let's have a quick look. I want to do the human in the loop, making sure the agent is doing the good thing. So it's pretty clear. It has created a YAML file for deploy API, what we want. Inside it, it's similar structure. We have different environments because now it's a .NET app. It will compile the .NET code, put them into zip, then publish that to the Azure Web App Service. That's good. And because it also followed all the details of the steps, you now also have a folder for each of the markdowns. These markdowns will be documented here. So it's all the files you're pretty familiar with, the same as our 002 deployment steps. And that's it. It's pretty good. So what you can do now is you can just go down and then ready for review, making sure you all happen with everything, then it will merge, then it will deploy the backend. However, let's just say you're not happy with it, right? So you want to ask the Copilot to continue working. So Copilot, what you will see is, can you please try to improve the documentation, all right? Once you put that over there, you can just still ask the question. That's what we call a follow-up question. As soon as I do that, the Copilot will pick up the same conversation. I love this part most. Every single time the Copilot see your interaction and trying to follow up your task, it will give you a googly eye like this. And then in the background, you can see the agent start to follow the conversation. It will be able to continue work on it. And if you go to the view session, again, it is starting up the container on the cloud, then it is able to continue working on it, just like what you saw earlier. Okay, so I'm not going to merge that, conscious of time. What we will do is, if you still remember, we do have another background work happening here, which is we want to deploy and change the pipeline to have multiple environment. You have dev, you have QA, basically lower environment need to deploy and test it correctly before the code can move to the app environment. Basically some gate control around it, right? So that is what we have. And if we look at the session, it took it, how long? I don't know how long, but basically finished it. So we started with put some instruction there, right? It is able to go through everything. Then the spec kit follow the instruction. Basically, let's do the step one, all the things I have defined in the pump. Then it will do step two, and then step three, so on and forth. So in the end, that session in the background, without any human kind of intervention, it is able to follow it and then walk through everything. And that is why I turn on the autopilot here. Autopilot basically will try to look at what agent need and try to provide an answer. You do not need to keep on looking at it. But when you use that, just be careful, making sure you are not what you are doing. You don't really want to set all the tasks into autopilot. You still want to oversee what the Copilot has been doing. So it's carry on. Then in the end, it did the checklist, then finally invoke the implementation step. That is how our YAML file come up. Then it also summarized these are the things I changed. I have understand all the environment, all the step are done, and it will also give you a detail of what they are and how it looks like. Okay, so that is good. But let's look at the final YAML file, how that looks like. That is our 004. So that is for multiple environment deployment. I will close the Copilot session. If you take a look, what it gives us is it has some input. That's good. Concurrency control, that's good. The key thing is we want it to be able to give us different environment. And in this case, it does. It says the code needs to go to the dev first before moving on to the QA, then finally going to the prod. And then with the dev environment, it will go through different steps. For example, check out the code, and it will do a validation of the basic, making sure there are no missing parameters, no syntax errors. It even does a what if, try to figure out what are the things to be changed, just making sure it will run. Finally, it's doing the deployment. So that is for the step to deploy the code into dev environment. Then once the dev is done, it will do the same thing. Now the code can go into the QA environment, that's app environment, right? And the tester can do the test. The key thing it now have, yes, it has a line here, 64, called the needs. What that means is if any of the step failed inside the deploy dev, you are not going to get to the deploy QA because the whole workflow fails. It's basically to enforce your dev team fix the bugs in the lower environment before you just push the new code into the app environment. Okay, so that's good. And also the change the environment in GitHub. you can specify different environment inside the repo. Each of the environment align with one of their, can be dev, can be QA, can be production. All right, so it's the same thing. It's going through the validation, backup, what if, and then finally do the deployment. The last environment is production. It's have the production environment and it needs all the QA to pass, etc., etc. So that's good. The YAML file is here. So if you want to add additional control into it, you can even, I will show you how the repo side looks like. If you now go into the setting, you do need to configure the environment with different parameters, different secrets. So in my case, I have been doing deployment to dev environment. And in there, I have set up one secret and 3 variables. These ones are the variables, the reference inside the GitHub Actions. It will be using them. And the benefit of having them inside the environment is, if anyone have access to your code repo, they are not going to see this. It is in a different setting. It's not with the code, but it's a pipeline configuration. And then I haven't done anything for the queue and the prod now, but if I copy these variables into this one, then the deployment can progress to the upper environment. And also, you'll probably be wondering, what is this? That's not the environment I have set up, right? That is because when the agent inside here trying to run, that agent is scoped into its own special environment called Copilot. So that Copilot will not accidentally try to use any of your secret variable you have defined here. It's a way to lock down the Copilot, so it's more secure. And if you look at the more, we have more configuration available for the cloud agent here as well, like firewalls, what are the code scanning requirements, what are the configuration you would like the Copilot to follow. Basically, in here, you can integrate with like a Azure MCP, integrate with the Microsoft Learn or Figma MCP, basically allow your agent to do more things than just writing the code. Okay. Great. Let me check. So let's quickly recap. So what we have done so far is, if I go back to my repo, and I have showed you a few different ways to use Spec Kit. The first one is we did some walkthrough in my local environment using the GitHub Copilot. We go through every single command, try to create all the specs for our web deployment. Basically all this, you can have a play yourself. And the second step is we look at the cloud agent, and in the cloud agent, it did a deployment for our APIs, which is here. Then finally, we also did a deployment inside our GitHub CLI. It creates a multi-environment deployment. Basically, it can help your code to publish the API environment as it goes. Okay, good. So that's pretty much all the key things I would like to share with you. And if I go back to my PowerPoint, him here. Okay, so you're welcome to give a try yourself, because for you to learn the Spec Kit, the best way is pretty much try to test it out yourself. And that repo I have put in the comment section already. You can fork it, because in order to run that repo, you do need to set up your Azure environment. Then a few secret configuration you will need to do. Okay, so I think I can open for some questions. I just have a quick look. Do we have any questions for me? I just start from the last one. Okay, I think one question is asking about can we do the same thing with Azure DevOps? So definitely. So the CI/CD pipeline itself is very similar. So the only difference is if you are using GitHub Actions, you are basically setting up that particular pattern the actions can pick up. But if you're using ADO, the ADO using YAML pipeline as well, but just different action blocks are slightly different. The only limitation with the ADO is you cannot really use the coding agent, the cloud agent, like I showed you in the second part of the demo. You have to run this session locally by Visual Studio Code IDE, or you can just using the CLI. So it does not have the kind of cloud running runtime feature over there. Unless you are running ADO, however, you have your repo hosted on GitHub, then you can enjoy all the agentic feature of GitHub. Okay, so that's one question. And then I'll keep on looking a little bit more. And yep, so SpecKit can definitely use with other agents. So if you remember doing my setup, when you initialize the coding agent, it has a long list of different Copilot or agents you are able to integrate with, like the codecs, etc. Basically, as long as they support it, you're basically able to use it. And keep in mind, the Spec Kit, based on what type of agent you use, it will specify and set up your local repository slightly different. In this case, this pattern is more for the Copilot, GitHub Copilot. If by using other agents, you will see the Spec Kit try to set up in a slighter way. But as long as the Spec Kit supports it, you should be able to use that. Okay, and okay, so a question about if we are not seeing the agent tab. So was checking the configuration or the license. So making sure you have the license for that agent tab in that particular repo. Otherwise, maybe you don't have that enabled, or you are missing some kind of subscription over there. So ideally, you should see that if we have all the permission, etc. Okay, great. And I just take a look. Is there any more questions? Okay, I think that's a few questions I have. That's all good. All right. So we'll have a little bit more time. So I might show you a little bit more. So if you are looking at GitHub Copilot, there are a few things you can do from here. For example, you are able to use that list. If you want to do a particular step from Spec Kit, you are able to see what other action you want to do. For example, if you remember, we have some gap from the earlier spec. Like this, if you look at tasks, you are able to see that the field box not ticked, right? What now, as the second round of iteration, I want the Copilot to understand and tell me why. What you can do is highlight the code block and then ask that to do the analyze and say why these are not implemented. Basically, that's the idea of tracking each of the items. If there's a gap, go back to the Copilot, ask the Copilot to look at this one again, give you a reason why it's not done, and it will give you some response. It's saying, do you want me to do that locally? Okay, yes, do it. And you can work with that multiple kind of conversation. Then if you look at here, so far we have been using the local mode. That means that session will run on your local computer. And then now it gives me some options, right? So I will say, the first option is just mark them as done because I think it's all done. The second option is I think there's some syntax error. That's why I'm not able to pick it up. So if I click on that, actually do some code fix before you can understand it. And then once you pick the option, the Spec Kit, the Copilot will continue working on that, try to figure out, oh, I'm able to actually fix the code, and then I'm able to continue with deployment. And also, we were talking about here, so you can also launch your session with GitHub Actions CI, which is the Copilot CI I showed you earlier. It basically runs that in a terminal window, so you don't need to have the Visual Studio Code open. You can have multiple sessions running at the background. Then you also have the cloud option. The cloud option basically goes to the agent tab. That job will dispatch into the kind of cloud, and then it will run. You can turn off your local environment. You don't need it. Okay, so that's some tip. And then if you look at the right-hand side, so when the agent trying to run some script, trying to exec some code, you have 3 different levels you can choose from, just like human in the loop. Default one is it will ask you if you want to run anything. Basically, you have full control. Then you can say, I want to always approve a pattern, always approve a particular command. You also have the option saying just always approve all. Highly not suggested, but you can see maybe there's some use case you want to go for that. Finally is autopilot. That is still in preview, and that is how we launched the CLI to implement multi-environment deployment. That will go through this command. Basically, the Copilot will automatically feedback to the questions and then progress with all the tasks. Okay, so that's that. And then I want to also show you a very good pop-up. That is the customization window. What you may notice is you so far have so many different ways your customized agent, skills, instructions, pump, MCP, plugin, hooks. There are so many things involved in your repo. You want to have a centralized place. You are able to see everything, right? Once you see them, you can clearly understand that the ones are active from my repo. That are the ones from extensions because I install some extensions, right? Because just remember, each of these MCP tools, etc., you have in the system will cost your token. You want to have a good kind of control of them, which one you want to use at what time. Then you can also have the skills or the skills you have locally. You want to create the new ones or want to download some from awesome Copilot. You can use a lot of skills. If you want to do customization, my suggestion is don't just start creating yourself. Look around because probably other people has done something similar. Rather than you start from scratch, you can utilize what they have done and then add a little bit more kind of customization to it the way you like it. Yep. Then you also have the customize the pump. You have the instruction file, agent.markdown. That is more for all sorts of for agents. The Copilot instruction is more specific for GitHub Copilot. Okay. If you don't like this, you can also generate. Basically, there are a lot of tools around Copilot. You can use them in the Visual Studio Code, and that Copilot session is still going. Okay. So my final tip is if you like multitasking, you don't really just want to have one session running and watch that session running all the time, you have an option here, which allows you to have multiple concurrent sessions running at the same time. That means is if you have multiple sessions running, you can switch between them. For example, that session currently is running. If I want to create a new one, I can use that sidebar. It will have a list of all the running sessions. Then you just click a new session. Then you can start with the second session at the same time. But the only thing is making sure you don't let the agents step on each other's toes. Ideally, each session is locked down into particular files, so they don't see each other's change. So there are some things you are able to kind of use and try to maximize how you are able to use Copilot to do the coding. Okay, so and also we have a few configuration inside the .bs code. The most important one is I don't have any MCP configured, but if you have MCP configuration, all these MCP tools can go in there. Then your agent now have ability to maybe look at live documentations, trying to integrate with different knowledge sources, etc. That will definitely improve the quality of how the spec kit is able to generate for you. Especially, remember, earlier we had a step called research, and that is how the spec kit will be able to look into this resource, try to pull more information back. Okay, so let's have a quick look. Do we have a little bit more? So we have a question. Can we use spec kit in Visual Studio Pro Edition? I need to double check. I think the Copilot is there. As long as you have the Copilot, the spec kit is just adding additional kind of extension. And in the end, you don't require anything from Visual Studio Code. I give it a try. I think it should work out. And also, do we have a preferred model? Yes, I do. But the good thing with GitHub Copilot is nowadays you have different agent options available in Visual Studio Code now. And I know I have 3 minutes, so I will wrap up very quickly. So if you come here, you can see you are using Visual Studio Code, GitHub Copilot, but we do have Codex agent, we have Cloud agent available inside, and those two is just not a large language model. It is the actual Codex agent from OpenAI, the actual Cloud agent from Cloud, Anthropic. So you can have the choice between which agent I want to use. Do I stick with the Copilot or I use one of these? Okay. And then if you stick with GitHub Copilot, you do have different options for different models now. There are a large number of models available. You have the GPT model, Gemini model, Cloud model. Okay. You can decide which one to use. My suggestion is don't spend too much time on the model. Pick the most popular one, well-known one, start with that. Typically, it should get your 95% of work done. For the last 5%, you start to explore if that task is very specific to a particular workload. Because in the end, what we want the Copilot to do is help us do our work. If we spend all the time comparing the model in the end and found out, oh, the first model I use is still the best. Basically, you are wasting a little bit of time. But always good to explore because you never know. Some of the model, they do have different characteristics. Okay, I better to stop. I think a few more slides I want to share with you in the end. If you don't know, we have Microsoft Build coming up on the 2nd and 3rd of June. You can join online. But yeah, for in San Francisco, you can even go there yourself. But I think just making sure you check out the Microsoft Build on the website, and then you can even sign up, join the online sessions. Okay. Also, I would really like your feedback. If you have a few seconds, you can scan QR code, give me some feedback, or tell us what you would like to know more in the future. Here is the QR code for you. So please take a few seconds to capture the QR code screenshot. I think it's a very simple form to fill in. Hopefully, all the information I provided to you today are helpful, you are able to give a go with Spec Kit or even just GitHub Copilot. It will help you to do your work much easier and try to understand how we can do agentic software development. And the next QR code is for our AI Genius series. If you have some feedback, you want to scan and look at more sessions, older sessions, that's the QR code. It's the channel. We have so many good videos and speakers in the channel. You can look at these sessions, and we have a few new sessions next week. So stay tuned. We have a lot of new content come up. And I think that's our final slides and the QR code. If you can scan that, it's a good thing to share on your LinkedIn, and you are able to show everyone you have joined me today and they have learned a few things about SpecKit and GitHub Copilot. All right, I think that is all from me. Thank you so much for joining me today. Looking forward to see you next time. Thank you.